Thank you so much. Colleagues, good morning. My name is Brian Morales. I'm the chief of the counter-narcotics branch at the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, or INL for short. I'm just going to provide a couple of administrative announcements and then turn it over to our colleagues to start the session. Today we are launching, so this is the first sub-working group meeting of 3.2, engaging people with substance use and substance use disorders. And this is the second of 3 meetings for the public health working group that we are covering today. Yesterday, we had the other 2 working groups with their sub-working group topics covered. And then we are going to sort of rebroadcast or rerun these meetings next week for the eastern regions of the world on the 25th and 26th of October. You are always more than welcome to join that session as well and to contribute to that session. Should you have any questions or concerns or comments, at the bottom right of the screen, you see the email address where you can contact us, syntheticscoalition@state.gov. We will continue accepting registrations for working groups and sub-working groups for the remainder of the coalition year, which ends in September. And if you would like these links to share with other government colleagues or international organization colleagues, you could always email us again, and we will provide you with these links so that you can send them out. We are also preparing and developing a website for the coalition, a new website. And so the presentations that we have today will be posted there. We will not record the comments, only the presentations. So the recording will stop following the presentations. And we're very grateful that there are international organization coordinators that have volunteered to support us as Secretariat, in addition to the State Department team. And so we will be sending out the meeting schedule for the remainder of the year over the coming days, as well as the calendar invites for the next few meetings, so that you have that on your schedules. And finally, I'm going to end with the meeting schedule. Today, we're looking at framing the issue, looking at major challenges in the field. Then we are going to be looking at sharing best practices, models, and identifying intervention points, as well as deliverables and commitments between the November to February timeframe. The goal and idea is to have very concrete, actionable deliverables and outcomes from this coalition. And so we're looking at expanding existing initiatives or creating new initiatives that can help in addressing this issue. We will have a check-in meeting with the working groups in March. And then from April to July, we'll be doing action planning and implementation. And that will be followed by, in August, evaluation and transition to ensure sustainability, which will be an effort to sort of wrap up the work that begins throughout all of these months into other organizations or processes, because in September, the coalition concludes its work with a final meeting and a wrap-up. But we envision that the initiatives that we further expand or initiate during this year will live on for years to come in an expanded form. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome the international organization coordinators for this sub-working group, who are Jose Luis Vasquez from the Organization of American States, CCAD, program manager there. We have also Anya Buse, who's a program manager at UNODC. And I'm going to just pause so that they can both introduce themselves for a moment. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. As Brian said, we're ready for the session, right? I don't see if Anja is already here with us, because we discussed yesterday. She should be she will be presenting also. She will be introducing the group, but we are very excited to participate. So Anja, if you are here, I just want to thank again Brian and INL. And as Brian said, I'm Jose Luis Vasquez. I work for CCAD, the Inter-American Drug Abuse Control Commission. And I'm very happy to be here co-chairing internationally this group, also with Anja and George Morimi. And we will also introduce the co-chairs, the co-chairs for this group, Yuri Cutipe from Peru, who is already connected, and the representative from France also. So, Dr. Kutipe, if you are connected, and just make sure you...
Sí, buenos días, José Luis, buenos días, Brian, y a todos los colegas y las colegas que están reunidos en este momento. Sí, pues, mi nombre es Yuri Kutipe, soy médico psiquiatra especializado en psiquiatría de niños y adolescentes y en salud pública. Trabajo actualmente como asesor del despacho del ministro de Salud acá en Perú, y he trabajado hasta hace pocos meses, por muchos años, como director de salud mental del Ministerio de Salud. Y actualmente el Ministerio de Salud desde hace unos años venimos impulsando la implementación de una red nacional de servicios de salud mental, donde la atención de los problemas de las personas por problemas que tienen problemas por consumo de sustancias está integrada justamente a estos servicios y a su vez con apoyo de la cooperación internacional, especialmente de la Embajada Americana y Plan Colombo, se ha podido, y OEA-CICAT, se ha podido capacitar a más de 8,000 profesionales en estos servicios en programas completos como el GROW y programas que son sensibles a poblaciones especialmente vulnerables como son las mujeres y también la población LGTBIQ. Agradezco la invitación y paso la palabra a mi colega Nicolás Price de justamente Francia.
Bonjour à toutes et tous, merci beaucoup de l'organisation de cette réunion que j'aurai le plaisir donc de piloter avec Yuri. Très rapidement, moi je suis médecin de santé publique et je suis président de la mission interministérielle de lutte contre les drogues et les conduites addictives. C'est une administration qui dépend de la première ministre française et qui vise à coordonner l'action de l'État dans toutes ses dimensions en matière donc de lutte contre les drogues, les conduites addictives et leurs conséquences. Je ne vais pas prendre plus de temps parce qu'il me revient d'introduire avec grand plaisir nos deux intervenantes qui vont réaliser donc cette première présentation qui va servir de cadre pour donner le ton de nos futurs travaux et des différents enjeux que nous allons porter durant plusieurs mois. Donc, je suis très heureux d'accueillir Madame Giovanna Campello, qui est chef de la section prévention, traitement et réhabilitation à l'ONUDC, ainsi que Anya Busse, qui dirigeait le programme de travail sur le traitement des troubles liés à l'usage de drogue dans la même section de l'ONUDC. Et donc, elles vont nous présenter une présentation qui s'intitule « Engaging People with Substance Use and Substance Use Disorders, Urgency and Hope ». Merci beaucoup à toutes les deux, Giovanna et Anya. On ne vous entend pas. Giovanna, Anna.
Can you hear us now?
Oui, parfait.
Yes, thank you so much. So I was saying thank you, co-chairs. It's a great honor to be here today, also big responsibility, which I'm sharing. I'm very relieved. What we would like to do in the next 20 minutes or so is to provide you with a sense of the opportunities that all of us collectively as international community, we have in engaging with people who use synthetic psychoactive substances or have disorders associated with this use. And what we do hope to do is to set the scene in a way that, on one hand, responds to the urgency of the situation in many parts of the world, but also at the same time really frames around the fact that there is a lot that can be done already now to support and protect the health and well-being of people who use with use disorders. And of course, if they so wish, support their recovery. And so therefore give also a sense of hope, and hence the title that you see on the screen. I will, let me see if this one moves. It doesn't looks like so it has not much intention to move. Aha, now it does, sorry. I will leave it also as a given that all of us are familiar with the multidimensional element of synthetic substances. So this covers the use of very different psychoactive substances. Some are internationally controlled, some are not, and there are different patterns of use in different parts of the world. So I will not spend a lot of time in illustrating how the phenomenon includes such different dimensions as the use of fentanyls in North America that is driving a large number of overdose deaths.
And my sincerest apologies. I'm sorry for interrupting the speaker. We're getting a lot of crackling noises because of your poor microphone quality, and that's a health issue for the interpreters. Can I ask you to try to speak a little bit lower, and we will see if that helps taking care of the clipping sounds. A little bit softer, not that loud, please.
Okay, I will try. So would that be better?
I believe it is better. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I was mentioning that this covers also the expansion of the use of methamphetamines, or the emergence of synthetic cannabinoids, or the use of ketamine. And with this, I've named just a few of the remarkable developments described by the latest World Drug Report this year. And also, I will not dwell, but I would like to underline that this is by no means a phenomenon limited to men. In fact, women represent more than 40% of people who use some of these synthetic substances. And in addition, the situation is much worse in prison settings. Let us not forget that prison does not stop drug use, including synthetic substances. And in fact, people in prison settings have much higher rates of drug use, HIV, TB, viral hepatitis than the general population. And then also in this setting, the situation is worse for women. I should not mention, but it's important that, of course, that mortality due to drugs is increasing, and this is mostly due to hepatitis C and other liver diseases, as well as opioid overdoses, many of those linked, of course, to synthetic opioid. And this is certainly the urgency that I was mentioning in the title. As I see it, there are a number of challenges that I've just illustrated, but they are also opportunities for us to collectively build an effective response. And I would like to organize the rest of the presentation around these. So, for example, the first opportunity that we have is linked to the fact that, largely speaking, as international community, we do know which are the effective responses that need to be implemented. What you see on the slides are some key publications that UNODC has published together with WHO, summarizing the scientific evidence with regard to all the services that are needed to protect and promote the health and well-being of people who use drugs and people with drug use disorder, and if they so wish, support their recovery. This is, of course, what on this slide is a particular focus, with a particular focus on opioid agonist treatment, as well as take-home naloxone. Because let me underline, when I say all services, I mean all services. I don't have in mind only abstinence-oriented residential treatment, for example, but all the spectrum of services from harm reduction to therapy, whether pharmacological or psychosocial, outpatient, inpatient, and recovery support. And we know that evidence-based treatment decreases drug use and HIV/AIDS, it decreases overdoses, it decreases crime, incarceration, prison overcrowding and associated problems, and it costs less. It costs less than prison and doing nothing. And at the same time, we also know that naloxone has been proven to be effective and safe in managing opioid overdoses while not leading to an increase in use, and including in low and middle income countries. And you see here some data from our Stop Overdose Safely initiative that we have implemented together with WHO. And maybe by now you're asking yourself, if we have all these wonderful tools, what is the problem? Why are people still dying? Why are people still suffering with addiction?
And my sincerest apologies. I'm very sorry. I have to interrupt you again. We're getting a lot of crackling sounds, and they're maybe damaging interpreters' hearing. And that's why we would like to ask you to speak even softer. If we can try again to speak even much, much softer than what you're speaking now.
Okay. That is the problem. The treatment
Okay,
gap.
please. Yes, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Only one person with drug use disorder in 5 is in treatment. And again, this is particularly the case for women. How can we expect the health and well-being of people who use drugs and with drug use disorder to improve if the vast majority of them are not in contact with services?
Interpreter on the wrong channel. I'm
This
sorry, go
is
ahead,
our
please.
first opportunity, investing in the lives of people by providing all the services that are needed to promote their health, well-being, and recovery.
Thank you. And just to continue from here, and I also we would like to unpack for you a little bit further what Giovanna has started to develop, and taking into account that synthetics are obviously the group of diverse substances. We will start the unpacking a little bit, looking at different substances, and then let's say different situations or different challenges and opportunities around that. And the first we want to look at with you are the fentanyls, which are obviously very well known at the moment. It's a synthetic opioid, which is very strong, much stronger than heroin, and is much associated with the current overdose crisis that we're all hearing so much about. And fentanyl, as Dimitri had mentioned just in the other meeting, is obviously does have medical use, but it's non-medical use which is raising the concern and is behind the overdoses. So there are a few considerations around the non-medical use of fentanyl, and when it comes to the treatment of fentanyl use disorders. On one side, as I said, it's a very potent opioid, and in that sense, we will see higher rates of tolerance and physical dependence associated with it, and such the known agonist treatments, such as methadone or buprenorphine, might have to be given in higher dosage than for other opioid use disorders, and also in countries that are much affected by fentanyl use, clinical protocols have been adjusted in this direction. Then the overdose response, Giovanna had already a slide on, but in a similar way also here, naloxone, which is an effective emergency medication to address an opioid overdose, might have to be given might have to be administered more often than in the case, for example, of a heroin overdose. All of this can be done, but there need to be adjustments that need to be made. And the last point here is that there is a certain risk, which comes from the, let's say, the pharmacological way how fentanyl is. It's shorter acting also than heroin, especially injectable fentanyl, of course. And thus people with dependence, with non-medical use will use it more frequently throughout the day to avoid withdrawal. And with that comes on one side the increased risk for overdose, but also if it's injected, the much increased risk of bloodborne infections. So nevertheless, also here there are opportunities, some I hinted at already. One thing is kind of there are certain things we know how to do well, and we just have to do more of this, which we know that works well. And we do have effective medications for the treatment of opioid use disorders, as said, with kind of adjustment of clinical protocols, such will also be effective. And the other medications were mentioned here. People using fentanyls and dependent on fentanyls will also often be socially marginalized, and thus a range of psychosocial supports will also be important for them. Maybe a few other considerations here under the opportunities, that there are a lot of good emerging practices that are being developed, especially in settings that have high rates of fentanyl use. And that could be, there are the medically supervised consumption rooms that are available in some countries, the co-design of services with people with lived and living experience that can guide kind of what services would be most effective for them. Take-home naloxone, we have mentioned, is a very evidence-based practice, and the overall addressing of marginalization, stigma, and so on. But I mean, this is still in many ways new, especially in certain areas of the world. This is new, and this is good also that it's new. Nevertheless, I mean, what we really will need is more monitoring, evaluation, research, and preparedness in the countries where fentanyl use is not so common for non-medical at the moment. Thank you. So also we would like to, and WHO colleagues are hopefully on the call, already alert everybody that the World Health Organization is working on or will soon be starting to update their guidelines on psychosocially assisted pharmacological treatment of opioid dependence. And hopefully this then will also be adapted to respond to the use of fentanyls. And another thing that might be picked up in the new guidelines is there is since a few years now a medication on the market, buprenorphine, which is evidence-based, we know, but there is a depot formulation which is not available maybe everywhere, but it is used already in clinical protocols, exist in a good number of countries, and there's good experience with it. Basically, I mean, it is much longer lasting than the methadone buprenorphine, which people take as a more or less daily dosage at the moment. So the depot formulation can last and cover people up to 4 weeks and manage the craving they would otherwise have. It might not be the preferred option for everyone, but it's an additional medication that we have in the toolkit. And from anecdotal evidence, we see that it might also work with very marginalized and unstable populations. So, and then, as we said, we're unpacking from the fentanyls. We wanted to look with you also at synthetic stimulants. And on this, we have, again, guidance documents available, UNODC, or together with the World Health Organization that you can see here. The International Standards on Treatment of Drug Use Disorders provide guidance. We do have a discussion paper that I'll talk about in a second around treatment of stimulant use disorders, and our colleagues from the UNODC HIV section have also developed kind of guidance how to work from a harm reduction perspective with people that are using stimulants. Next slide. So in this discussion paper that we have, and also kind of in other publications, the psychosocial interventions that are effective have been summarized, especially contingency management is coming through with strong evidence, and cognitive behavioral therapy, family therapy has also evidence. Next. And we are discussing already in this, I think, 2019 publication, options for treatment, for pharmacological treatment of stimulant use disorders. And I think at this moment, there's no evidence-based medication available, and we have to think of it from a one-size-fits-all perspective. So for example, for the management of stimulant intoxication, we might need a different medication than for the management of stimulant use dependence or relapse prevention. So what this paper really does with regards to pharmacological treatment is also calling for more research. the Cochrane, which you know is really, if there's a Cochrane review, that's the gold standard in many ways in medical research. And the Cochrane reviews are a number around stimulant use, but maybe no clear gold standard or no scalable gold standard is emerging yet, right? They are often asking again for more research. Maybe also here, the one thing that seems to shine through is contingency management. Only a lot of treatment services find that eventually challenging for implementation. So that's something we would need to work on. And there are medication studies ongoing in many parts of the world at the moment. So for example, kind of around bupropion and naltrexone, a lot of research is going, looking at the potential of long-acting amphetamines that could be potential, or there's a mirtazapine study at the moment also ongoing in Australia. So we are, let's say, hopeful, but at this moment, there is no medication with clear evidence available or registered anywhere.
And I will take over a couple of more opportunities from here. Anya has mentioned and has unpacked for us the fentanyls and the stimulant use disorders a bit more. But we were thinking, what about emergencies related to acute intoxication? And I'm thinking about it from the point of view of the fact that we have data from the markets that show a continuous increase of new substances coming in and out of markets, often very rapidly. And it is very possible that there are emergency rooms all around the world that find themselves having to deal with people that are intoxicated on substances and nobody knows what to do. And this is, of course, a cause for great concern for practitioners. And but even there, I think there is something that we can start to build on, and specifically there has been work done in the United Kingdom that we have also picked up on really
and
not
my apologies,
panicking.
my sincerest apologies. I would again, I'd like to ask you to speak
voice.
lower because the microphone is clipping, it's distorting the sound, and we're getting very bad crackling. Go ahead, please.
If I go like this, it's better. I wonder if this is any better. But anyway, the point is to start with symptomatic care and work from there. There is a lot that can already be done and on this while substances get hopefully identified and studied more. Moving on from substances to actual people that maybe are underserved by services. I was already mentioning in my introductory slides about the issues of how women do use synthetic drugs and are well underrepresented in treatment. And I would like to point out the fact that women do respond as well as men to services tailored to them, and that we have a lot of very practical and precise guidance on how this could look like, as including for pregnant women. And this is, for example, a slide that gives you an overall look of how a comprehensive and quality approach focus on women what it would mean in practice. Loads of work on trauma, on safety consideration, on childcare, and tailoring in general. So just to say that we do have the tools to up our game and invest in this underrepresented group of people in the services. And the same goes for adolescents. What you see on the slide, you see our guidance together with WHO and some guidance basically promoting behavioral approaches and family therapy. And that has recently been confirmed by this other review that you see on the slide that not only looks at well-established interventions, but also possible other intervention adjunctive like pharmacotherapy or digital strategies.
So coming more or less to a closing of our presentation, we just wanted to look with you also for a moment at issues around people in contact with the criminal justice system. And on one side, also to let everybody know that there is strong technical guidance available on one side on alternatives to conviction or punishment, but then also on health services in prison settings for people who use drugs and with drug use disorders, and very strong policy backup. And there to just mention the Bangkok rules, the Tokyo rules, and for in prison, the Mandela rules, which all have been approved by the General Assembly and give kind of clear guidance in this regard. We have some data on UNODC around people in contact with criminal justice system at different stages of the criminal justice system. And what you see here is that especially at the arrest and at the conviction stage, over 50% of people that are in contact for drug-related offenses are though for offenses that are personal use offenses only, and for which, in line with the International Drug Control Conventions, measures such as treatment, rehabilitation, and so on could be offered, including as complete alternatives to conviction or punishment. And as Giovanna mentioned, I think we all would agree that incarceration alone will surely not reduce drug use, treat drug dependence, or reduce recidivism. For that, we need evidence-based interventions. And for people with criminal justice contacts, ideally, and if possible, cases of minor nature applied as alternatives to conviction or punishment. And this slide comes from one of the publications I showed you before, and what it basically says is that there are a number of tools that the justice system has from the pre-arrest stage, trial stage, on to the pre-sentencing stage to divert people with drug use disorders in adequate cases of a minor nature from the justice system to the more effective health system for them. We have done a mapping around this with our member states, which we can share. But the good news from that is there is high levels of interest in implementing alternatives to incarceration. And a lot of countries have at least one alternative already available, and the others are looking into developing and also at developing more than one alternative to conviction or punishment for people with drug use disorders in contact with the criminal justice system. Right? So before we come to a close, just a few words around stigma, human rights, and not doing any harm, and how this also is important for synthetic use. So on one side, I think guidance from the policy documents, for example, the ANGAS outcome document, and from technical documents is clear. Compulsory treatment alone is not in line with human rights, and it's not effective. We are talking, including in this working group here, about engagement, moving that from coercion to cohesion, building therapeutic relationships, and treating drug use disorders through healthcare, not punishment, which we have lined out more in the documents you see there. And in the same way, around not doing any harm but making things better, we also need to embrace and monitor the quality of treatment and care services we are offering. And you might have heard that UNODC, together with many other agencies that are here today, have developed also quality standards to look, based on the international standards for treatment of drug use disorders, to look at treatment services and systems. Very important also, and really last not least, is to have a well-trained and empathetic workforce that is kind of offering patient-centered care, is not neglecting or discriminating against people that are coming with substance use disorders, and that is well trained to recognize and address stigma. And on this here, on the slide, you see a quote from one of these overdose studies that Giovanna mentioned before, where we trained people that were using drugs and at risk of overdose together with other community members. And that is really one of the things that seems to be evidence-based in stigma reduction, to have meaningful interactions. And that we found also in the qualitative study. Person here was saying, I used to think everybody was just waiting for us all to die, but now I see they actually care about saving my life, right? So, and at the bottom of the slide, we just mentioned also trauma-informed care principles, which I think are another important aspect about thinking doing no harm, given that these often very marginalized populations of people, including with synthetic drug dependence, we don't want to re-traumatize, but rather treat them in a trauma-informed way.
And with the last word of conclusion, I hope that in spite of the technical difficulties, we have managed to give you an idea on how there is a lot that we can do, and in spite of some really difficult and tragic situation all around the world, we can build on a strong system of services for people who use drugs and people with drug use disorders. And that will help us a lot in addressing this urgency. And therefore, moving from firefighting to really a long-term gain in promoting the health, well-being, and recovery of people who use drugs and people with drug use disorder, including synthetic substances, of course, and really moving from urgency to hope. Thank you so very much for your patience and attention. Over to the co-chairs.